Return to Roots podcast. Welcome. Today we bring you Cadence. Cadence, can you please share with us who you are?
Hi, I'm Candace Herold, and I am a U.S. Navy vet. I was in the Navy for 17 years and 9 months. I was a hospital corpsman, and then I was also a Fleet Marine Force corpsman. I've been stationed between the United States and Japan my whole career, and I've been stationed with the Marine Corps. I've deployed with the Army. I've done 2 deployments to the Middle East, and I was also a single mom for like 14 of the years I was in. So, and I brought was able, yeah, and I was able to bring my son with me to Japan when I was stationed in Japan twice. So, and I just got out of I hired tenure out of the Navy 3 years ago because I could not pick up the next rank. So that was like a whole journey in itself. So that's just kind of like in a nutshell, a snapshot. Like, kind of like I was stationed in started off at Norfolk, Virginia, as a undesignated deck seaman. I didn't have a rate in the Navy yet. Then I struck hospital corpsman. Went to Great Lakes. Was able to go to corps school. Then came to Naval Medical Center San Diego. Then went to Naval Hospital Okinawa, and then from Okinawa to 3rd Marine Air Wing on Miramar here in San Diego. And then I went back to Naval Hospital Yokosuka. Then I came back to San Diego, was at back to Naval Medical Center San Diego, and then to Miramar Clinic again. So my whole career has just been back and forth between San Diego and Japan.
What when you became a corpsman, what modality or what specialty did you do?
So I came on as a corpsman, as a quad zero, which basically you're like the basic hospital corpsman. And I tried, and I was, did that. I want to go to field medical battalion training to go with the Marines because I've already experienced the ship life as an undesignated seaman, and I found out real quick, the ship life is not for me. So yeah, I found it real quick. I'm like, I don't like this at all. And like, what are my other options? And like, oh, you can go with the Marines. I'm like, I'll go do that instead. And
Yeah.
so so I was at E5 when I went to field medical battalion training in North Carolina at Camp Lejeune. And from that was kind of like a 2000 2011 I went, and I got there, and then from North Carolina I went to 3rd Marine Air Wing on Miramar and was swinging with the wing as they call it.
We barely missed each other in you were at the hospital in Yokosuka and I was in Atsugi in 2016. So I was in Atsugi from 2016 to 17, then we migrated to Iwakuni and then back and forth.
Oh, so I was in Naval Hospital Yokosuka from December 2014, and I left in March 2017.
Yeah,
So
we
we were there like at the
barely
same time. I mean, we could have crossed
exactly.
paths and just didn't even know it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you got your son in Japan as a single mother. That is quite an accomplishment. Like how was it being a single mother in a forward deployed environment and actually able to have your child around?
So when my son was 1 years old, he was born in 2007. So I joined the military in 2003, had my son in 2007, and then I took him with me when he was like 13 months old. His dad was already in Okinawa, and so we just kind of met him up in Okinawa. And I went there as a E4, so it was a little bit easier as an E4 because you could be dependent as an E4. But it's like I was planning it, like how could I be a single mom and still do my job? And I would ask coworkers, I'm like, what's the best place for me to go where kids are a great place to live, grow up, like what duty station? And everyone told me Japan. So I picked Okinawa, Japan, and went to the Naval Hospital there at Camp Lester before they moved it to Camp Foster. And having my son in Japan, he actually got to go to a Japanese daycare. and I was able, yeah. So he was learning Japanese, which forced me to learn Japanese because I couldn't talk to my son. Yeah,
That's really
they're
funny.
speaking Japanese and at home speaking English, and sometimes you like smash the two languages together. And me and this daycare, like, we have no idea what we're saying at all.
That's the beauty
So
of the
the
So
Yoshians, right?
Yeah, the
yeah,
Yochins. My daughter went to a Yochin as well,
a yochin.
and oh yeah, it was, honestly, it's like one of the best, w in my opinion, it's one of the best experiences that a kid could have, because the Yochins start giving them those fundamentals on how to,
Yes.
like, seriously, the fundamentals that they teach them there. It's not as, educational because they're focused more on how to act in the Yochins, but they teach them how to clean up after themselves. They teach them manners. It's really phenomenal. And then also being an English speaker inside of a Yochin, you learn a lot too
Yeah.
of
And plus, I
Japanese.
had the fortunate that my CDC provider that took care of my son from like 6 months, weeks old and up, her husband and her and their family got moved to Okinawa too. And then we all lived with, like, within the same military housing. So it's kind of like Maverick still had the same babysitter in San Diego where I had him. So when I took him to Okinawa, so his daycare provider
Wow.
was there too. So it worked out perfectly. So it's kind of like that small community, military community is small. So her husband was a sergeant in the Marine Corps, and I was like a corpsman. So we, Marines and corpsmen go together. So
Right.
yeah,
That's
so it
wonderful.
worked
And
out.
I saw that you also went through the med board in 2017, 2018. And how was that for you?
So going through the med board, I was in Naval Hospital Yokosuka, and in 2017, I lost complete function. I'm open. I'm willing to talk about this. Because I lost complete function of my right leg, and they did a whole range of um, MRIs, and turned out they diagnosed me with multiple sclerosis (MS),
Wow.
and yeah, and that was a shock. Even though I was like healthy, I was eating clean, I was exercising, I still lost function of my right leg. So I was hospitalized for 3 days in the hospital, given a round of steroids to kind of calm down my immune, because what MS is your nervous system attacking, or your nervous system is being attacked by your immune system. So like it's kind of like your immune system
Wow.
gets confused and attacks your nervous system. So yeah, and they started me on MS medication, and they said in Yokosuka we got sent me back to the States for med board. So a diagnosis like an autoimmune disorder like that is automatic med board. So I had to go back to Naval Medical Center San Diego for, it was a year long process. And for me, it really sucked because I was always like, hard charger, like fill in the gaps. If someone doesn't want to do something, I'll step up and do it. But in here, I was told, like, nope, just focus on getting better, focus on your next step, prepare to be like, medically discharged from the military.
Yes.
We completely understand that, and I don't know if you know this, but myself and Yogi also went through the med board process. I was able to just drop my retirement paperwork, but Yogi could speak on his experience.
So I can tell you that going through a med board process is definitely not for the faint of heart.
No,
It is
it's
the hardest thing I can tell you I've gone through in my military career. And one the thing that there's there's support, right? But there's no personal support. There's
no,
no
there isn't.
um
It's kind of like they treat you like you're garbage because you're sick or you're faking it. You're like, how can I fake this? I mean, seriously.
right. And no one, the commands, they're not able to relate with what you're going through, right? And as you mentioned, their perspective is, well, it can't be that serious, right? If you have a positive attitude, well, it can't be that bad because otherwise you're not really in pain or you're not doing these things, right? Um,
Right.
but unfortunately, it's a huge struggle, and so you kind of lose some support from within the command, right? And
Yes.
then the medical process itself, you're fighting the command, you're fighting the medical facilities to get the care that you want, right? You were fighting to stay in the military, right? So was I.
Right.
I was fighting to stay in. So that's even a more difficult process because you're fighting all of the systems there, and then you feel like you're not getting any support, right? And then another thing with the med board process is that there's a specific structure, but there's nothing that can be that specific because every med board process is different, and so that makes it more challenging, right? It's every med board process is a one of its own for that person individually. And then within here in San Diego, I don't know what your experience was, but my experience has been that there's not enough manning. And I'm talking about the medical doctors, or the
Yeah.
PCMs, or the corpsmans. Uh, I've met a lot more of the people that are going through the system, working in the system, all the people that are going through the med board being TAD to those offices, and they have no idea what they're doing. They're just trying to go through their process themselves. So that makes it even more challenging to be able
Yeah.
to navigate through those waters the right way to try to get the outcome that not only that you want, but that is the right outcome for you.
Yeah, and it's almost like they're reinventing the wheel every single case. Every single case is like that. Sorry, I had to put that out, and that was one of the most frustrating parts. Nobody really knew what was going on. Very few corpsmen know that process.
And the process is not an easy one, and plus, like, you can't get a whole lot of information from people or the people who deal with that. They're like, okay, you have to go to these VA appointments and go to these appointments, and then you have to wait. And then it wasn't easy for me because at that time I was already in for like 11 plus years, and they sent me to a dermatology clinic to work to help to be the OR manager for their dermatology clinic for like their biopsy and clinic. And I had a 2 year E5, and then here I am a 12-year E5. And the 2 year E5, she got insanely jealous because all the corpsmen would listen to me more than to her. But I also told him, like, you haven't developed a personal relationship with them, you haven't talked to them, you haven't asked them about their families, you haven't done this and this. If you want a relationship with them, you got to start conversations and tell stories. And but she's like, no, you have to fall in line and fall underneath me, and you have to do what I tell you to do. It's kind of like very authoritative. And I'm like, yeah. And I just looked at him like, that's not going to happen. She didn't
It's
like
not
that at
about
all.
your rank.
It's not
It's
about you.
never about your
No,
rank.
leadership
It's
is
all
never
about,
about you.
yeah.
So that was another challenge too, just dealing with egos and personalities and like status. People who are all about status. Yeah,
Yeah, and there's we have a huge population of people like that in the military that really
a
want to
lot.
flex that status. Yeah,
It's like I get it. Again, you made it E5 2 years, but that's yes, you're book smart, but do you have all the other all the other skills you need, like the soft skills, like the personal skills? Are you personable, where your corpsman or your junior says can come to you and say, "Hey, I got a problem," or "Hey, I need to tell you something."
yeah. Soft skills are super important. Simon Sinek says that soft skills are some of the most important tools and resources that um, people don't really utilize as much as they should. So I like how you mentioned that. And speaking of Simon Sinek, what kind of books or podcasts or media would you suggest a transitioning service member that's going through the transition, and maybe even that person going through their med board process right now, what do you suggest for them?
So going through the med board is going to be frustrating, but just take it one day at a time. And also, one of the books, there's one book on here that I kind of like. I'm very big. I'm an avid reader. I read a lot of books. So some like three of the books I picked out was like the one thing by got it right here, by Gary Keller, and it talks about how you just focus on one thing and then you build on from there. And then the other book is called Atomic Habits by James Clear.
I
Yeah,
love
it's
that.
like
I'm listening to it again.
I know I have the book. I've read it once. I'm probably gonna read it again. But it's just kind of like tiny habits that you do on a daily basis, and which you're trying to improve yourself 1% per day. If you do that for a whole year, you improve by 365%. If you just focus on like one day at a time and just kind of like what can I do to improve, and then also I'm very like mindset driven. So actually think about your mindset. Like, okay, what are some negative or toxic mindsets I have that are actually preventing me from moving forward? Or what's my hang up? Or do I have a grudge against someone? Do I need to like, forgive that person and just move on? Be like, you know what? It's not worth this energy or this stress. Just kind of let it go. Just let stuff go and just move on. And then also another book that I really like is Visioneering by Andy Stanley. He talks about how you kind of sorry, how you try to envision like what do you want to do your next step, like look into college classes, or I looked into like going to IT school. And also when I was going through med board, I really wanted to stay in. And I was able to do that, showing that, like, hey, I'm willing to pull my weight because some people who are on med boards, they just sit in a corner and refuse to work because they're just waiting to get out, but I still pull my weight, and I was able to stay in and be able to go on permanent limited duty. I was not operational anymore. I couldn't go with the Marines or be deployed anymore, but could be shore duty the entire time. Yeah, and just kind of like not kind of like using my illness as a crutch to say I'm not going to work, or just use it as a complaining. Well, I'm trying to say is don't use it as like a reason for you to be stopped in your tracks, or victim, or that victim mentality too, so it doesn't help you at all.
And I agree. You We can fall into the victim mentality very easily, and it's very difficult to because one, you feel abandoned, right? An organization that you're giving your life to, and you have given your life to with all your heart. Now it almost feels like they're turning their back on you, when the reality is that they don't really understand, right? They don't understand, because we're dealing with another human being, and as another human being that hasn't experienced what we're going through, there's no way for them to relate, right? And unfortunately, we have
Right.
to going through those processes. Um, we have to deal with so many of the people, the human beings, and whatever their baggage that they're carrying, that it's even harder because you reach your limit of tolerance at times, and it just hurts. It just hurts. And then you start piling up more and more pain.
Yeah, and it just starts piling on more and more pain, especially when you're like kind of ripped from a duty station where you established yourself and you know people and you have developed those relationships, and you get ripped from that duty station because of an illness, and you get transferred to a new duty station where no one knows you. And then the mentality, I don't know, my experience, the mentality around like limited duty people who are going through med boards or limited duty, they treat you like you're garbage, like you're nothing. You could be a EP, sailor at your previous duty station, and you move to this duty station, they treat you like you're garbage because you're, going through a med board, you're faking it, or it's like no, there's everyone's different. Everyone has a reason why they're going through the med board, and a lot of times it's just completely out of your control.
Yeah, I was very similar situation. When I went through my med board, I was actually in Iwakuni, Japan, and I haven't been formally diagnosed with this, but they think that I have a condition that pretty much made it to where I wasn't even supposed to be able to come to Japan. And it was in my record. It was signed off on. I was proved to come out medically because come out to Japan, you have to pass medical screenings, and it was in my record that I was highly probable of having this condition. And when they found out that I not only had it, but I was having attacks while I was on the ship, um, they were like, "Well, you gotta go. You can't be here in Japan." So I went from I was a senior chief, uh, and I mean, I was like one of the top guys,
Hmm.
hard charger, um, very good at what I did. I loved what I did. I love working with sailors. I love that camaraderie, and I really enjoyed it. And I was about to get put into a position that there would have been no other job that would have topped this job, and all that got taken away from me
Hmm.
because of um, a physical thing that just prevented me from doing it. And I got sent from Japan after moving my family out there, like
Hmm.
then sent to San Diego and went through that whole entire song and dance. And when you check into a command, um, people just kind of, it's not always, they don't say anything to you for the most part. Um, at least when you're a senior chief, they don't say anything, but that in the back of your head, you're thinking that. And it's like these little things are like, hey, can you do this? Well, shoot, my medical appointments prevent me from being consistent. My medical condition has been exacerbated because of my situation. So I can't really do all this stuff, you
And
know?
you can't hold significant leadership positions either because you're going through a med board, and that limits you. That
Yeah.
kind of handcuffs you from it going. Because I know, like before I was diagnosed, I had the flare up at the end of January 2017, and I know that month I was having a hard time picking up first class because corpsman rating is extremely competitive because we have so many people, like 2,500 plus people trying to go for one rank, and maybe it's like 1-2% pickup rate. And my chain of command told me, he's like, hey, if you don't pick up this time around, we're gonna promote you. We're gonna cap you to HM1 because you've shown yourself worthy. You're actually functioning at a chief level. And I was like, and I was like, I was at E5 for a long time. Like I picked up E5 fast. Like within 5 years in the military, I picked up E5, and then just trying to get East, like trying to make HM1, that was like extremely hard because it's so competitive. And I worked to establish relationships, to like put myself out there, to do collaterals, to kind of like get recognized for everything, and just build those relationships and respect and talk to people so everyone knows me. And they're like, hey, we're going to promote you. And then February, the end of January, I was diagnosed with MS, and then March 30th, I was flown out of there, and I lost my promotion. I lost everything that I worked up for. It took me like I was working up to that pace for 2 years straight
Mm,
because I was determined, and I just lost it like that, gone,
yeah.
And that
and it was
that's very
devastating.
painful. Yeah.
It's very painful and very devastating. All that work I put into it for 2 years straight and taken away.
So you get through your med board, you successfully stay in after your med board.
Hmm.
What was next? Like what happened after that?
So after they said I was approved, but I was going to be permanent limited duty, couldn't deploy anymore. So I got orders to Naval Branch Health Clinic on Miramar. So it's kind of like I'm going back to 3rd Mall, away in the Station of the Marines, back to Miramar. And I was at the clinic there, and they just stuck me at the front desk. of a clinic and just like gave me no leadership position. It was kind of like just a little bit harder because I guess like everyone else established, but it was just kind of like it was kind of a little chaotic because there's like poor communication or there's also like a little bit of favoritism of some of the chain of command. Like one each one was trying to put his favorites in their positions of leadership, so it was just a little bit difficult. And I was there for a couple of years trying to pick up HM1, but it just seemed like I lost all that momentum, all that hard work I put in when I was in Japan. And it was like, I felt like it was three times harder. Personally, I thought it was three times harder just to kind of get myself out there, especially when you're stuck in patient care in a very busy clinic where you have like we have like what 10 providers and they have a full schedule of like 10 providers and each provider has like 10 to 12 patients and you're checking them in answering phones. It's kind of hard to break away from that front desk of checking in patients to go do other collaterals and stuff. And after a while I just realized, and then after a while I think it was like 2019, because I got there at 2018, 2019 or 2020, one of those 2 years, a NavAdmin came out saying anyone that's permanent limited duty are not allowed to reenlist. And that's when I was like, okay, I see. All right, so now I see it. They're not going to let me reenlist because I'm permanent limited duty. And the NavAdmin came out. So then my mind shift said, like, well, this is probably going to be the end of the road for me. So I better start thinking what I'm going to do after I get out of the military when I HYT out. And I know my chief was pushing me to pick up HM1, but I told him like, hey, this NAV admin came out saying anyone that's permanent limited duty cannot reenlist. And I'll be reenlisted in 2021, and this NAV admin came out in 2019. And he's like, oh, that doesn't matter. I'm like, I think it does. But so I just started planning to hire tenure out of the Navy and just think about like, what's my next step? Do I continue doing medical work or do I transfer to a different field? And like a year out, I started doing looking at the VA, start like submitting my disability paperwork to the VA because I already had a record of them. Started going to every single medical appointment for every little thing that I haven't been checked for my neck, for my back, for my hip, just getting x-rays, doing all those appointments that I need that I can just put into my record and just continue. And then I looked into schools, and then I found a good school and went to IT school because right now IT they do certification now. They don't care about degrees. There's like certification for like cybersecurity, Network Plus, CompTIA A Plus, and I went that route. And my friend Marissa, we were stationed twice together, so she hired tenured out of Miramar too. So when she hired tenured out, she got a DoD contracting job for the hospital doing health informatics, IT, like maintaining the electronic health record. And then she contacted me. She knew I was getting out. So she got me a job about 6 months after I got out of the military.
So when you transition um, when you transitioned out, you went into the IT side. Is that correct? Is that did I follow
Uh,
that correctly?
yes, because while I was still in, I saw that the Navy was transferring all their paper records to all digital records. And they had MHS Genesis, which is replacing Alta. So I was like,
Yeah.
seeing that transition, I'm like, you know what? I could probably take all my medical knowledge and just transfer to IT and focus on like health records or medical information. I go to IT school because IT, they have their own language, their own acronyms for all their stuff. So I did
Mm.
that and I was able to smoothly transition into this job, just helping providers saying, hey, I scanned the wrong paperwork into the wrong patient's record. Can you please take it out and put it in the right patient's record? Or they want to modify or change the health record that the doctors use now, all digital stuff. Like, hey, we need this questionnaire is not up to national standards. Have the providers provide all the information and just kind of like be able to talk to the providers, find out what they want, and then talk to IT personnel on the other side of like Cerner and tell them like, okay, they want to do this, this, and this is how they want to do it. And here's all the information. I gathered all the information. So if you have any questions, let me know. So it's kind of like I was kind of resolving their issues, like for if they have like, hey, the values for complete blood count has changed, so we need to change the standard. So here's all the information, the paperwork, and everything that you need. And plus, I know when I went online for the new like digital record, like NICU didn't even have like their system set up, so that was a something we had to help them resolve to get their ward up and running. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no,
For
that totally makes
someone,
sense.
for
And
someone that's go ahead, Chris.
all right, I, so I have a really quick question. What is your sorry, my alarm system went off. What is so? My quick question is, what is your thought process, or what's your opinion on how corpsmen can't just go right out into the civilian sector and pick up a job because the qualifications don't transfer over?
So as a hospital corpsman, we go through like 14 weeks of just basic corpsman knowledge, and then for like field medical battalion training, that's 8 weeks. That's a kind of like a combat medic you're becoming for the Navy and Marine Corps. But the only certifications you get is probably like your basic life support and your CPR certification. But because you didn't go to college and you didn't get national certification, you gotta go back to school and do all the schooling, like with this for nursing or for a doctor. Even though you have all this medical knowledge and you work underneath nurses and doctors licensed in the military, it's their licenses, not yours. So when you transition out of the military, you can't just roll right into medical field. I mean, you there's certain qualifications you can get. It's like LVN license, which is a licensed vocational nurse. You can get that while you're active duty, or but you have to get nationally certified before you can go work in a civilian hospital or even work with a military treatment facility. So like you have yeah, the military doesn't really provide corpsman certification outside the military. If that makes sense.
What would be if you could share with someone that is going through the same or similar stuff that you're going through, right? What could you provide in guidance in saying what is the best path to go for the IT certification?
So for IT certification, there's online schools you can go to, and you can go through the VA if you still have your GI Bill still available. There's a list of schools you can pull up on the VA websites that show you where you can go to school for IT for whatever you want to do, and the VA will pay for it. So if they pay for online, you won't get the full BAH through the VA, but if you go in person school, like to local here, like in like UCSD or even Miramar College, I know UCSD has a cybersecurity 12-month boot camp, I think, where there's a crash course of IT certifications and you get qualified. And I know ACI Learning, I did all mine online, and from Colorado Springs. I did everything online, and they give you a voucher to go to your IT certification. Plus, I don't know if you know, what's that one organization? It's called Onward. There's actually
Onward
some
Ops?
Onward Ops, yeah, and they actually pay for one certification for free for you. So, and there's also other organizations that'll help you get your certifications for free. You just have to study, and they'll pay for your certification for IT. Even for program manager, they'll do that too. So there's a lot of good programs out there. And I know the Veterans Beer Club is really big here in San Diego, and they have multiple chapters. Like, I feel like there's like a new chapter every couple of months, I feel like. So it's growing. And that's where you can get like the most information. You can talk to other vets. And I've ran into so many vets. And the man who started Veterans Beer Club was actually my commanding officer when I was stationed with 3rd Marine Air Wing. Brian Grana was my commanding officer,
Really?
so he was, yeah. And Kevin Cortez, his best friend, I'm friends with him and his wife, and we both go to the same church here in San Diego, so I know them very well too. So
What
it's
a coincidence. That's awesome.
it's awesome. So like, yeah, I met Kevin at a Super Bowl party, and then this was like after I got out, and then Brian Grana showed up to the Super Bowl party. I'm like, hey, what's up, sir? I was like, I wasn't expecting it at all. So this was like
Yeah, the beer club
years
is
ago.
really cool. I
Yeah,
really I've gone to a couple VPCs down there in San Diego, and it's a really cool experience. Really
it's just,
is.
and it's veterans helping other veterans, and that's the coolest thing about it. And that's where you can make the most connections. And I think the best thing you can do, whether you're still in, you're thinking about getting out, just make those connections with veterans who are already out. So if you have any questions, or if life happens and you have a life situation, whether medical or something traumatic happened in your life, it doesn't have to be medical, it could be anything else. And you building those connections with other veterans, going to meetups like the Veterans Beer Club is a great way to kind of like find out if what organizations are helping out vets, like what's there's a lot of free programs, a lot of programs that will help veterans. Like I think Rady's management class for the Rady's Children's Hospital, they actually will teach you for free, get your master's in their program. And they won't even
Oh,
touch your
wow.
jail bill. So there's a lot of programs out there that definitely help vets. And it just you just got to get connected to those people.
So you've been out for a little while now, and when you were in, it sounded like you really loved your job while you were in Japan. It sounded like you were in your groove. You were really good at what you were doing. Then you get essentially, I mean, I would say kicked, but you weren't able to move your leg. But
Yeah.
um, you get into a situation where you lose all of it instantly, and then you're able to you fight super hard, you stay in, and then it's kind of like a dull moment because you're getting passed up for everything, and then you get out and you find yourself in the medical field, but doing IT work. What did it take for you to get in that mindset after service to kind of like like be in that transition mindset? What did it take for you?
So kind of like in that transition, I kind of because like when I had my medical episode and all stuff, at that moment I realized my entire identity was wrapped up in the uniform, and then actually I had to take some time and sit down, like who am I outside of the uniform. And then I also looked at like, okay, it's when I'm getting out of the military, how do I want to dress? How do I want people to see me? Do I want to be that grouchy vet that's all like always crapping all the time? I come from a military family, so I know. So and I was like, and plus I'm like, I was thinking like all my friends are military. I need to start making some civilian friends and kind of like figure out that whole aspect. So I got involved in my church and the women's prayer and talking to other people, finding out what they do, and just kind of like putting myself out there. And I ran into my friend Kelly, and she was a stylist and she had her own clothing line. So I went to her and I'm like, "Can you help me? I only know how to dress in jeans and t-shirts. Can you help me kind of like put a wardrobe together where I look put together? Because I am completely clueless on style and all that other stuff. Because in the military, I didn't have to worry about it. I just had to put on a uniform 5 days a week or 7 days a week and don't worry about anything else. You have one hairstyle, either in a bun or shorts. So, and she kind of helped me kind of like find out like what colors work for me, what don't work for me, like what troubles I have with clothing, what and she was able to help me to navigate that area. And she was able to help me put together a wardrobe where I was able to, you know, have like 7 different pieces of clothing, but able to have like 30 different outfits in those clothing. So it's just kind of like I sought out people that could help me transition into the military. It can be uncomfortable, but it was worth it just to be able to step out and just ask for help from, and people are more than willing to help. I mean, if you step out and ask for help, someone's going to step up and say, "Hey, I know someone that can help you." And a lot of times when you ask for help, people will step up and like just, like, "Hey, you know what? I can't help you, but I know who can."
And that's especially relevant in our veteran community, right? We're always here to try to help each other out, um, and take us to the next level. So I have run into that part of everybody out here, huge collaborative. How can, no one left behind? The only problem is are you as a transitioning service member, as a veteran, as still active duty that don't know what you're doing, right? Are you gonna go out there and ask and reach out? Because nobody can read your mind, right? Nobody's is gonna be able to like, hey Candace, can I come and be your best friend and can you help me figure out my life? No one's gonna be able to read that, right? Now if I ask you on the other hand, it's like, hey, I'm about to transition. I don't know what I'm doing. Can you please help me out? You know, it changes things, right? Um, so thank you for sharing that, and thank you for being able to be a huge beacon for our community here. Um, if you could go back in time, right, knowing what you know now, knowing everything, and you could talk to your pre-military service member, right, before you join the military, what advice would you give yourself to be able to navigate those 17 years and hopefully, if there was no NavAdmins or anything like that, to be able to make it successful, right? Or more enjoyable. What would you tell yourself? What kind of advice would you tell yourself?
I would tell myself just don't, because I know like when you first join, you're kind of fearful, but it's just kind of like, just take one day at a time. There's gonna be good days, there's gonna be bad days, but just make sure you don't let that drag you down and don't dwell on it or don't beat yourself up. Because I know for like the first 5, 10 years in the military, I would beat myself up because, oh, that didn't work out the way I expected to. But just take it one day at a time, breathe, and just keep going. You're gonna be fine. You're gonna do great, and just make relationships and don't worry about the look. Don't worry about things don't go as planned because that's just life.
And now that you've been out and you're established and you've gone through your transition, and I would say you're mostly reintegrated and you have this good persona about you, what advice and how early would you give it to yourself, knowing that you're gonna have a hard transition, knowing that your higher tenure is gonna happen? What advice would you give yourself to be able to prepare for your transition?
I know there's a lot of negativity when you're transitioning out. A lot of people will be like, try to like, get every ounce of work out of you. But just make sure you set clear guidelines and don't let it, because I know sometimes I let it frustrate me and I said things probably I shouldn't have, like, hey, but yeah, it just comes, it just comes with like the personalities because they're trying to like, keep you, but you're just like, nope, I'm getting out and I need the time to do this. And also, just put in your leave because a lot of times, even though they like, oh, you're getting out, you shouldn't be taking leave, but you do need that time, and it's okay if you take time off. Because when I got out of the military, I took 6 months off to go to school and just kind of decompress when I got out because it was stressful getting out. And there's some people who just kind of make it hard for no reason, or they just kind of look at you like, "Oh, you're getting out, oh traitor." But it's like, well, it wasn't in my control to begin with, so this is where I'm at, and just kind of don't let it like affect you so bad because people are going to have their ideas and their mindsets, and you can't control other people.
Yeah, you know those people that are out there that say, "Oh, you're getting out, you're a traitor." Guess what? You're going to be getting out too.
Hmm.
And you know what? You're going to be asking for time off. You're going to be asking for all these favors. I want you to really think about this. How did you treat other sailors, Marines, Coast Guardmen, Guardians, soldiers? How did you treat them when they were separating? I'm sorry, you just triggered something, and it fires me up. Like I get really pissed about this topic because it doesn't matter if people are getting out. We all get out. We either
Eventually.
get a DD, yeah, we all get a DD 214, whether we're walking out or they're carrying us to bury us. We all get out. We all get a DD 214. So knock that shit off.
Yeah. And I actually, since I got out, I've ran into other retirees, like Master Chiefs. They're like, "Oh, I was Master Chief of this," and I was like, "But I know." Once I got out, I just kind of like, you know what? That's my life. That book is closed in my life. The uniform is hung up. Now it's time to move on to the next phase of my life. And I realized like a lot of veterans hang on to that uniform the rest of their life. It's like, yeah, that was a that was like a chapter in your life, but now that chapter's closed. Now go create a new one.
And I'm glad you mentioned that because yes, all of your identity, that was part of your identity. It's not who you are as a human being, right? You
Right.
can be stuck, um, and it's hard to process those things through. But you have to find a different thing to be a part of, to be present in the moment, not be stuck in the past, right?
Right.
Um, no, Candice, thank you so much for your invaluable um, and willingness to share what you went through, right? It wasn't a pleasant experience. You hit a lot of roadblocks on your career, um, but you're here now and you're successful, and you're in a much better place that unfortunately people that decided to stay in um, might not be, right?
Right.
Um, so thank you so much. How can our audience get a hold of you and ask you for some advice?
Um, Probably the best would probably through my email. I can give it to you guys or put in a chat. It'd be like cmherold30 They can reach out to me, ask any questions or any advice or anything personal they want to ask for if they're transitioning out or if they're having any issues with their chain of command for whatever reason.
And then with that, is there anything else that you want to share with our audience before we start wrapping this up?
Um, just make sure you have a goal, and even if it's small, doesn't matter what it is, start somewhere and just do one little thing a day just to achieve it because it just builds up. It builds up. It does. It does. Like shifting your mindset or, dropping some mentalities that worked in the military because a lot of military mentalities don't work in the civilian sector.
I fully agree. One book that also clarifies that even more, right? Because we talk about the power of habit or the atomic habits all the time, but the power of habit by Charles Duggin actually explains why creating a habit is so valid, right? When you're doing and you're changing everything every day, you're gonna end up mentally and physically exhausted, right? When you create habits, you're it'll tell you in the book, but your brain, there's a certain part of your brain that takes over that is no longer taxing to the rest of your body and your brain. It's just an automatic reaction,
Hmm.
right? So if
Right.
you go you can make a choice of either go for a run every day at a specific time, or as you mentioned, read a book or better yourself as, as at a specific time doing it, or that's the exact book, Chris, or the
This is it right
Oh, that's
here.
it. Yeah. You also reminded me of a book by Dr. Caroline Leaf, Rewire Your Brain. It's how you can
yes,
turn old mindsets and like kind of rewire your brain to think about a new pathway in your brain. They actually have scientific. That book is really cool. Rewire Your
yes,
Brain by Dr. Caroline Leaf. Yeah.
yes. That you
I
got me
read a lot
excited
of
for that
books.
book.
Yeah.
Me too. In the search of
Yeah,
knowledge and improvement, right?
Hmm. Right.
But
I
no,
average
seriously.
about three a month at least.
15 minutes a day. I try to like read my book at least 15 minutes a day. Doesn't It's not a lot of time, but it's just enough. And I just have a book in my purse, and like if I'm like in a waiting room or waiting for someone, I just pull it out and start reading it while I'm waiting.
Well, Candace, thank you so much for joining us today. We really truly appreciate you. Thank you for being part of the tribe. And if there's anything that else that you want to share later on, you're more than welcome to come back on the podcast, and then we can share and talk about it, right? Because I'm sure that you, now that you started, seeing about this as a format of information, there's going to be more things that are going to come up in your mind, right? And also, every third Wednesday of every month, we host what is called the Veteran Series, where we have people come in, all obviously veterans and veteran supporters and organizations, but to try and create a collective online to be able to have a place to where we can come, and if we have issues and or solutions, we can get together and fix whatever problems that we're facing.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you guys for having me on here. It's been an honor, and just thank you guys for letting me tell my story.
Yeah, Candace, thank you very much for coming on here. Everybody else that's listening, I want you guys to go into LinkedIn right now and look up Candace. It's also going to be in the show bio, the information down below. You could click on her LinkedIn. Candace is a Navy veteran who went into the IT field after the medical field and has a story of um, dealing with the medical board and also winning the medical board and then separating at higher tenure. So take a listen, also follow her, and make sure you send her a message saying that you found her off of Mildevet. To everybody that's out there that's going through a military transition, it's not all rainbows and unicorns. It's your transition. Take charge of it. Mildevet out.
Peace.